Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Bakari Lumumba, back once again, the progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Back once again with another video, another topic that we're going to be discussing tonight. And we're going to be discussing, but before we do that, make sure you hit that subscribe and that like button as well as the notification bell so you'll be updated on future, of course, videos. So we're going to be having a conversation tonight. And we're talking about what is your red bike moment. So many people may be stating, why is this called a red bike moment? And this red bike moment, of course, was inspired by the late, great, first three-time heavyweight champion of all time. We're talking about none other than Muhammad Ali, who at the time was known as Cassius Marcellus Clay. So those of you who may not be in the know, and I don't know who would not be in the know about the late, great Muhammad Ali. But for most people who don't know that, at the tender age of 12, Muhammad Ali had his red Schwinn bike stolen outside of the annual Louisville Home Show. Cassius Clay at the time then was in tears, found a policeman to report the crime and told the officer that he wanted to whoop the thief who stole his bike. Of course, the police officer happened to be a boxing trainer on the side and told him, hey, if you want to do that, then you need to learn how to fight. If young Cassius at the time had not been the victim of a stolen bicycle, had he not taken advice of that officer, his life certainly would have taken a different path, right? So I think we talk about the red bike moment. Cassius Clay's stolen bike became a catalyst for his boxing career and illustrated how he could find victory and purpose in the midst of calamity, even at the tender age of 12. And I came up with this idea because I took my son to the Muhammad Ali Center for his 11th birthday. And we're going through, of course, my son loved it. But one of the things that we found was this concept of the red bike moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually play a video about the red bike moment from the Ali Center. And then we're going to go ahead and get the conversation started. So that's what we're going to do here.
And my camera to work.
Welcome to the Generation Ali story booth. Muhammad Ali spent his life fighting outside of the ring as a humanitarian. Like him, we are all fighting for something. Fighting for a clean environment, for your children's future, fighting an illness. What are you fighting for? When Ali, then Cassius Marcellus Clay, was 12 years old, someone stole his red bicycle. Clay found a policeman and stated that he wanted to whoop the thief. That cop was Sergeant Joe Martin, trained boxers. He encouraged Clay to learn to fight before taking on the thief. Clay spent the next 6 years training under Martin. What is your red bike moment, where a challenge produced a transformational event in your life? Watch a few videos from other visitors. Be inspired by people.
So as you can see, that was the red bike moment at the Ali Center. As I stated before, what inspired me to actually come up with this idea of asking the question, what was your red bike moment, was, of course, my son and I, for his 11th birthday, going to the Ali Center to, of course, celebrate his 11th birthday and allowing him to learn about the late, greatest of all time heavyweight champion, also known as the Louisville Lip, Muhammad Ali. So, and furthermore, I think it's important, even on my website, I'll talk about my red bike moment, right? You all may have seen in the caption photo for this broadcast, there's a picture of me when I was 4 or 5 years old. My red bike moment, of course, was not one that was rooted in calamity, but it was rooted in a situation which at a very early age, I learned about the horrors of the African Holocaust. And we know it's known as the MAAFA, colonialism, imperialism, racism, and slavery. And I also learned vividly about the Middle Passage. And for most Black children, that oftentimes, unfortunately, would lead to maybe some self-loathing, some self-hatred, so on and so forth. But for me, it inspired me, of course, to be an advocate for, of course, Black empowerment and fight against anti-Black racism at a very early age. So anyone who's known me has stated that, from a very early age, I was this way. And so my red bike moment, of course, came from learning about, of course, the indignities that our ancestors suffered during, of course, their yoke of oppression. But I also learned that we never acquiesced to the vicissitudes of chattel enslavement, and we never acquiesced our humanity. And I always tell people that we know that there were over 300 documented slave revolts in the Western world. Keyword is just documented. And we know that there were over 150 documented shipboard insurrections. And so that shows that we never, of course, acquiesced to this idea and concept of course, that we were meant for servitude. We know that unfortunately many of those in power tried to teach us this, tried to disseminate this information to us, but we never accepted that to be true. And many people, I think, should also be aware that the impetus, the catalyst for slave revolts throughout the world, right, with African people, we're talking about if it was in Panama, if it was in Brazil, if it was in Jamaica, if it was in Haiti, of course, even if it was in the United States of America, or even, of course, shipboard insurrections during the Middle Passage was, of course, African cultural retention. In fact, we know that for many shipboard insurrections, it was the visible, the view of Africa, the fact that they could still see the African continent. There was an advocacy and a push and a fight to want to, of course, return home. So I think that's one thing that people should be aware of. But of course, my red bike moment came due to literature, right? Black literature, Black history. And of course, we want to make sure everyone can tap in and share their story about what helped them develop this sense of Black consciousness. And then we can even ask the question of how do you develop a healthy Black, of course, identity here in, of course, what many people call the death and decadence of the Western Hemisphere, right? That question, of course, could be extrapolated to the African world, right? But I think it's very important that we talk about how do we develop a healthy Black identity. So once again, we hope some people tap in. I'm still going to put the link in the chat, and we're having a conversation, of course, about the red bike moment. And the many of you who are unaware, the link is in the chat. So if you want to come in and be part of the conversation, the red bike moment is representative of Muhammad Ali. His red bike was stolen at the age of 12. He turned calamity into, of course, success, and he learned how to box. And of course, won a gold medal in the 1960 Rome Olympics. And later became the first 3-time heavyweight champion in the world. As we all know, he won the heavyweight championship from Sonny Liston, who was known as the Big Bear at the time. Many people thought he was going to get waxed, but he ended up waxing him. He won the rematch, of course, in the state of Maine. And then we also know, moving forward, that he was stripped of the title, came back, fight of the century, March 9th, 1971, lost to Joe Frazier, but then regained the title in 74 in what was then known as the country of Zaire, which is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And then, of course, he lost the title, 15-round split decision, I believe, to Leon Spinks, but then regained the title and then made a rematch in which he became the first 3-time heavyweight champion of the world. And so we want to honor, of course, that great line of divine. We know that Fannie Lou Hamer always teaches us to never forget where we come from and praise the bridge that carried us over. And I believe, of course, that Muhammad Ali is one of those bridges. I believe that he was part of that legacy of audacious self-assertion, that Black radical tradition of audacious self-assertion in the face of course, of white supremacy. And we know Marcus Garvey taught us that even under the most severe conditions, we should never hate or dislike ourselves. And I think Muhammad Ali was a great example of that. We know there were some other issues with Muhammad Ali, but we're not going to touch on that today. But once again, and we're talking about how can you develop a healthy Black identity? What is your red bike moment? I think one of the key things that we want to discuss as well is this concept of, and many of you are aware of Black psychology, this concept of nigrescence theory, right? Many Black people have to go through a traumatic or pivotal experience in their lives in order to have a thorough consciousness of what it means to be Black, and not only for themselves, but in relation to society and the world that we live in. Many scholars argue that one should not have to go through something like that in order to have a healthy Black identity. They should have to have some type of traumatic experience, as we would argue, a red bike moment for one comes to develop a healthy sense of who they are as a Black person. We know that even if we look at the Harvard implicit bias test, and unfortunately, it states that most Black people, unfortunately, have a pro-white, anti-Black disposition, right? And I think we can all agree that that leads to some of the misfortunes that we find, of course, in the Black community. So we definitely want to address these issues, do it in a respectful way, Hope some people could come on. We could have a conversation about what was your red bike moment, if one, or you could say, hey, I didn't have a red bike moment. I was able to have a healthy Black frame of reference from an early age due to the socialization in my household from parents, uncles, aunts, older siblings, cousins, so on and so forth. I know that's something that I've really pushed for in my household with my son and daughter. I can recall that if many of you are aware, many of you should be aware, of course, of the infamous doll test that was administered by Kenneth and Mammy doctors. Excuse me, let me put some respect on the name. Doctors Kenneth and Mammy Clark. And as we know, that this was a pivotal piece of evidence that was used, of course, in Brown v. Board of Education, 1954, Topeka, Kansas. We can have another conversation about Brown v. Board. We got that coming up next week. But what we do know, that was a pivotal piece of evidence that was used, in which they argued that the education that the students was receiving was teaching them that they were inferior, of course, to whites, and leading to low self-esteem and racially disempowering, self-destructive behavior. With my daughter, when she was 4, we did the doll test, and she picked the Black doll, the smart doll, the beautiful doll, the intelligent doll, the courageous doll, so on and so forth. And I asked her, said, "Hey, why did you pick the Black doll?" She said, "Because that's the doll that looks like me." Had the same conversation with her to the test again when she was 8, and she gave me the same answers. And so I told her, I was very happy the fact that she had a healthy Black disposition. I know I've even mentioned this, I think, on some previous broadcasts, that my daughter's reading the book Betty Before X, and it gives basically a biography of Betty Shabazz's life before she met, of course, Malcolm X, growing up in Detroit. And so there was a segment in the book where Betty X talked about she suffered from colorism, some issues of self-hatred, where she unfortunately wanted to be like the white women she saw in the beauty magazines. And so my daughter would read a chapter a day, and then after she would read the chapter, we would kind of, okay, let's unpack what you read. What are your thoughts, so on and so forth. And my daughter said that she didn't like the fact that there was a time, of course, in Betty Shabazz's life where she did not like who she was. And of course, she came out of that, met Malcolm X, and we know the rest was history, as they say. But this is something I think is very important. I would even argue that more, just as important as reading, writing, and of course arithmetic, we have to teach our children and inculcate them with a healthy concept, a healthy understanding, and a factual understanding of who they are as a people. We know that one of the working definitions of Black nationalism, or even Pan-Africanism, is that we are distinct people with a distinct history, heritage, culture, and historical, of course, personality. And we should organize around those issues, right, to empower ourselves. We know that other racial ethnic groups do that. And it's not called being racist, it's called being ethnocentric, right? That one of the legacies that we have found of our ancestors here in the Western world is the understanding the importance of building institutions to serve our own needs, right? Not being at the whim, of course, of white institutions that historically and even contemporarily do us harm as, of course, sites of anti-Blackness. So definitely, I just wanted to have this conversation. I don't see anyone here on the live, which is a bit disconcerting, right? But hey, it happens sometimes. But definitely just wanted to kind of hop on, have a brief conversation. Looks like it's going to be brief about, of course, Muhammad Ali, the red bike moment, right? His bike being stolen at the age of 12. And then, of course, as a result of the bike being stolen, him wanting to fight, going to the police officer saying, "Hey, I want to whoop this chump that stole my bike." And of course, being told, "Hey, if you want to learn how to fight," right? If you want to do that, you're going to need to know how to fight. And then, of course, the rest was history. As we know, in 1960, he went to the Olympics in Rome and won a gold medal in the light heavyweight division. Of course, moved up to heavyweight, and the rest was history. But what the red bike moment really symbolizes is his ability to take calamity, and out of calamity, develop a sense of victory and purpose. And I think that that's what we have to do as a people throughout our time here, of course, on the planet, is that we know we're living in a situation in which, as Paul Robeson stated many years ago, many moons ago, right, as the elders would say, that the battlefield is everywhere. There is no sheltered rear. And I think it's incumbent upon us to understand that and make sure that in any situation that we're in, we're able to take whatever negative energy has been thrown our way and develop that into something positive. We know for many brothers, it's working out. I knew there was another brother of mine who I consider to be a mentor of sorts, he took that and became an entrepreneur and really started striving to develop an entrepreneurial spirit and create business for himself, right? So on and so forth. So I think that's what is important. I think these are the type of things that we must focus on, and in doing so, we can make sure that we can have a red bike moment that is worthy of sharing and passing down from generation to, of course, generation. So with that said, I'm going to log off. But once again, I'm going to, if you ever get a chance, please review some books on Black psychology, particularly this concept of nigrescence. I'm going to put it in the chat. William Cross actually came up with this theory, talks about, many scholars actually argue that the nigrescence theory, this concept of developing a healthy Black identity after, of course, having an unhealthy Black identity, is representative of Malcolm X's life, right? So when we talk about nigrescence theory, we have this concept of pre-encounter, right? During the pre-encounter stage, this is when I talked about with the Harvard implicit bias test, one may have a pro-white, anti-Black disposition. This pre-encounter stage is idealized by the dominant traditional white worldview and the denigration of a Black worldview. Pre-encounter tends to be active or even passive, right? People in the active pre-encounter stage deliberately idealize whites and white culture, inform anti-Black attitudes and, of course, behaviors. I think we all know someone or two people who are representative of that. But if we talk about the passive, people experiencing passive or assimilating pre-encounter tend to believe that the personal effort will guarantee passage into white culture, the realization of the American dream, since people are highly motivated to be accepted by the dominant group. And at the same time, they also accept the negative stereotypes about Blacks and the positive stereotypes of whites, since their views are influenced and reinforced by the dominant cultural institutions. But then you have this encounter stage, or pre-encounter, we would argue, was what Malcolm was, what Detroit read, correct? When he was, had the conk hair, doing drugs, so on and so forth. Then we have the encounter stage. It's characterized by conscious awareness that the white worldview is no longer viable, that one must find a new identity, right? This awareness is usually aroused by an event, an environment that profoundly touches a Black person's inner thinking, spurring them to reevaluate the relationship between Blacks and whites. Typically, some of the emotions one will feel is confusion, hopelessness, anxiety, depression, anger. We know this, right? This would be an example of Malcolm when he was in prison, right? Then we have emotion, right? During the emotion stage, the person psychologically and physically withdraws to Blackness in the Black world. Black racial identity dominates individual self-identity, but the person may not know what it really means to be Black. So the person may use stereotypes of what they learned from white culture to define Black people and act accordingly, such as wearing Black clothes, listening to Black music, and it's tempting to speak in a Black slang or dialect, right? Black vernacular. The person may be angry at themselves for not realizing the differences earlier. This tends to happen with Black adolescents who can't find meaningful purposes for themselves. This is something we typically find, particularly in Black kids, Black youths who grow up in the suburbs, right? They get to maybe a PWI, HWI, historically white institution, predominantly white institution, then they start having these issues when they realize that things aren't what they seem to be or what they believe they were. And then, of course, you have emotion, right? According to, of course, William Cross, the emotion state is an acceptance of the multitude of ways to be enact Blackness, right? The fervor for emotion levels off, so the emotionalism has leveled off. The person might begin to redevelop relationships with family members or friends who were cast off as underserving Blackness during that emotion phase. Also during this stage, a person might be better able to control the behavior and intense emotions when participating in dominant society. And then you have internalization, right? Internalization during this stage, the dissonance between the old self and the new self have resolved. At this stage, a person might adapt a more nuanced definition of Blackness and reject simplistic either or definitions. A person's values and cultures are rooted in informed African heritage and history. The person is connected spiritually and psychologically to African descendant community. Then last but not least, we have internalization commitment. This is the idea and concept. The person becomes an institution builder. So many people would argue that internalization was when Malcolm became El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. The internalization commitment was when he became a Pan-Africanist and created the Organization of African American Unity, which of course is modeled off the African Union, the Organization of African Unity, which is now known as the African Union. So that's all I have for now. Appreciate you all. Until next time, peace.